All right. Well, when Kyle asked me to join you guys and talk about something that matters, I guess, to small firm architects, I mean, I really meant what I said in the little blurb about as small firm architects, we have a lot of balls to keep in the air and a lot of things to juggle. 15 minutes before this presentation, I was like sending out a proposal for new work while also texting with a team, someone who works for me about, something that was going on while also like refilling my water bottle because I have needs as a human. So, that's kind of how it always is. I guess I'm curious too. I'm going to open my thing so I can see more people, but if there's a way to show of hands, like how many are firm owners here? Like if you can raise your hand or something. Yeah, okay. So a lot of folks in ownership position. Okay, that's helpful for me to know. All right, now I'm gonna make this little again. So anyway, this is a lot of sort of knowledge from my own experience of trying to do this exact thing. So I'm definitely going to leave time at the end for questions and discussion because I think that this finding your professional voice is not coming from the perspective of someone who has found hers, as in now it's done, but as one who continues to find her professional voice and grow into that after whatever 20 plus years in this industry. So let's see, that doesn't work. How about that? Okay. So introduction. So Kyle already kind of gave you a little bit of introduction by way of my background. I do have a bit of a unique background in so far as I did not start in architecture. Really, I have a degree in architecture, but then I worked construction for 4 years and I started in the field as a laborer. So just absolutely carrying gravel in buckets, literally. The guys would take smoke breaks and I would eat a sandwich. So I was up to like 6 sandwiches a day at one point. That has a lot, it was great. And that has a lot of influence, honestly, on how I think about practice and how I think about buildings and how I think about interacting with clients and all that kind of stuff. So that's an important part. It's also a big part of my voice. It's a part of my online voice. It's a part of my what I think is important to talk about when it comes to being an architect and interfacing with the profession is coming from a very strong construction background. That, to me, at first, I thought was kind of a little something that I shouldn't talk about, that I wouldn't be taken seriously if I revealed that I did not have all these internships or I didn't work for, fancy firms or whatever, that I actually worked as a construction laborer. In fact, when I took that job, I had professors and friends telling me that I was ruining my education or I was wasting my time. First of all, whoever says that to a 23-year-old, what? There's so much of life ahead of you when you're 23. You're not ruining your education by learning another aspect of the industry. But it had me pretty worried. And for a long time, I was a little bit ginger about sharing that part of my background. Then I realized that it was that exact thing that set me apart and that was a big part of my voice. So I think, as a point of contemplation, whatever those things are in your own background that might be that hook or that interesting part of your story that sets you apart, or that is something, even not just from a strategic standpoint of like it sets you apart in the marketplace, which is important, but also is something you're passionate about, something you care about. So anyway, that's a big part of my background. The other part is I grew up on a farm, and that is a big part of my voice too, that I kind of suppressed for a while because I thought, well, architecture is all about cities. Architecture is about, understanding the urban environment. And that was most of my education and most of my practice, still is most of my practice. But this is my farmhouse that I live in, that I renovated and that I live in. And it's on a farm and it's 150 acres. This is a big part of who I am, and it's okay. It's okay to have that as a contrast. And then the other big part, by way of introduction, which Kyle also mentioned, is my teaching. Teaching is one of the best ways to find out what you think about things because you have to talk to other people. about it, and you're interacting with students. I feel like I learned almost more from my students on a daily basis because I was learning how to articulate ideas. I was learning how to convey ideas, and there's no better training than teaching in that way. So, all those things kind of came together, and then obviously, worked for UTL, which was fantastic. Worked full-time in academia for a little bit, and then launched my practice with 0 clients and 0 business plan and 0. I launched it completely by accident. So I'll tell that story real quickly as part of this introduction, which is to say, I was I was full-time in academia. I loved what I was doing, but I'm a builder. I'm meant to be in the industry where we build and make buildings. And so full-time academia was not a great fit for me. And one day I did the thing where you walk in and you say, I can't do this anymore. I had zero plan. I calculated I had X number of days of vacation that they were going to pay me out, and I had X number of dollars in the bank of savings. I got another roommate, and I just reduced my expenses, and I just started saying, hi, anyone have any work for me? Can I farm myself out? A few months after that, I realized that I had enough work that I should probably get an LLC. So I did that on April 15th, 2014. And then I guess I accidentally had an architecture firm. So I hired my first person 2 years later, and kind of have built the practice since then. So I think, for those of you who are firm owners, some of you, probably most of you, went about it in a much more considered and thoughtful and planned out way, which is great. And for those of you who didn't, sometimes it can feel, or even those of you who did, sometimes it can feel like in the midst of all of that, where do I get to stop and say, what am I about? What am I talking about? How do I talk about these things? And how do I do that when I also have to figure out how to accept payments on Stripe, how? So anyway, so a little bit more on that sort of introduction to kind of help you understand where I'm coming from. So I think, that leads us to, I think about this a lot of times when I think about presenting projects or presenting work, where you know how in movie trailers they say, in a world where the world is ending and there are bad guys on every horizon. That's how I kind of think about this moment, where in a world where I am juggling 7,000 things and everybody needs my attention, and how do I actually do the bigger things, whether it's strategic planning or, as we're talking about here, finding your voice, or that kind of thing. So how do I do that? So that's what I tried to set out to answer today. And this is obviously big underline here from my perspective. So I'm looking forward to maybe hearing some other folks' perspective as well. All right. So these are the kind of things, the buckets, I guess, that might go into this. So the sort of getting your voice out there, making sure, these are kind of things that we've got to talk about, that we have to engage with: marketing, business development, professional development, networking, and discourse. I add discourse at the end because I think a lot of us are interested in not just cranking out work, but also participating in larger conversations. I think that's a common thread among many architects, is that we're not just interested in that, like I said, cranking out stuff, although that's a big part of what we have to do. But the other stuff it seems less fun. So, or less, I use the word dirty words. You don't really talk about this in school, or you don't really talk about this, it would be rare to get together with, well, at least, in my case, I guess, with architecture colleagues and be like, how's your marketing strategy? What biz dev have you been doing lately? In terms of conversations, no, you want to talk about projects and design and a client situation or that kind of thing. So, I think a lot of these things are seen in the profession as a little bit sort of dirty words. We're not really supposed to, architects don't advertise, they don't talk about these things. And I think that does us a disservice. Also, who likes networking? Like that's boring. That sounds really terrible. So, but unfortunately, or fortunately, as I'm about to reframe it, these things are actually all, they can be fun and interesting and part of building the practice. So I think I look at this and I start by saying, what do I enjoy about any of these things? Like what is the part that's fun? Because ultimately, when we're juggling so many things, if it's not fun, you're not going to do it. If it's, it's like anything else. So if you're trying to eat better, you're trying to work out more, you're trying to do these things, if you make it hard and not fun, you're not going to do it. So it has to be tasty and fun to want to do it. So I think, what about these things do you enjoy? How can these things be made fun? And then when it's not fun, what can you outsource? Like, what kind of connections can you make to say, you know what, I really, really, I'll speak for myself. I hate editing video. I hate it. I don't want to do it. It's annoying. I don't want to do it. So I hired someone who helps me do that. And I'm like, this is the best thing ever. Here's a stupid thing that is such a bottleneck for me. And in fact, it's a bottleneck right now. She has a whole bunch of videos for me lined up in our shared Dropbox. And I'm still the bottleneck because I can't even get to it to review all of it. But at least she's doing the editing and I'm not. So outsourcing. And she loves to do it. I hate doing it. And then how can we combine some of these things? So, marketing, Kyle mentioned my Substack. I'm also very active on Twitter, or X, as I don't like to call it. So more on that coming up soon. But basically, Twitter has become marketing, business development, professional development, networking, and discourse. So I send out one message and I'm covering all these things. I'm selling my services, I'm learning things, I'm participating in wider conversations, and I'm making new friends. So, and new business connections. So how can we try to combine some of these things to make it work? So I think the most important thing here is that it has to be, you have to know yourself. So I think of this phrase like know thyself. My mom had this like embroidered thing. She used to do cross stitch and she had this embroidered, all these flowery letters. And I was fascinated with it when I was a little girl. And I sort of didn't even realize it was letters until I was a little older. And then I realized it said like know thyself. And I think about that as a graphic from time to time, but also just as like how important is that of a reminder? It's to know yourself. So I'm speaking a lot from my personality. So, but you should think about it from yours. So it has to be fun. I already talked about that. So, and what is fun to you? So someone else is like, Marilyn hates video editing. I love doing that. That's super fun. So what it is about it for you? These strategies and these things have to be sustainable. So I've talked with many people who are like, oh, I hate social media. I don't want to post 10 times a day. I'm like, well, you don't have to. You can post 1 time a day. What is sustainable for you to engage with, whether it's social media or networking or marketing or whatever? It has to be something that's sustainable and repeatable. It has to be worthwhile and it has to deliver on value. If it's not delivering on the time you're putting into it, your time is a precious resource. If you're spending 6 hours a week on something and it's not delivering for you, then it's not worthwhile, then you gotta find a new thing. That being said, sometimes these things are about chipping away. So whether it's social media or whether it's networking, you have no idea, or discourse even, you have no idea. I've had things come back to me where I gave a talk years ago or I sent a tweet a year ago and someone comes back and says, I've been following you ever since you said that. And I really want to know more, like tell me more about what you never know. When you just put things out into the world, you actually don't know how it's going to come back to you. So I will say that about if you're spending 6 hours a week on something and it's not delivering value, be prepared to jettison it. But at the same time, you might need to do it for a while, like after 2 weeks and you only have 10 followers or whatever, if you're trying to do a social media thing, then okay, maybe we need to give it longer than 2 weeks. Like that's tough, that can be difficult. So I think that goes back to fun and sustainable as well. If you're someone who needs immediate gratification, then social media can sometimes be a drag. I'm sure you've all experienced that. Sometimes also it can be great for immediate gratification because someone's liking your stuff right away. So I think the delivering on value part is something that's more long-term. I can point to 6 figures worth of business I've gotten from Twitter. It is delivering on its value. But for the first like year and a half or 2 years, I couldn't point to dollars. I could point to sort of connections and I could point to interesting things, but I was just sort of following my curiosity, which is another one of my things I'm always saying is to just do that and see, like, this seems like something that might be good. And after a while, it did deliver on the value. So here are the rules for doing this. Okay, boring. There aren't any. Like, this is actually one of the most important things that I have learned. I remember someone saying this to me when I was working on my social media. I was trying to amp up some stuff and I was trying to be better on Instagram and whatever. And someone just said to me, there aren't any rules, Marilyn. You can do whatever you want. Like, post this kind of post. If it doesn't work, oh well, try something else. Like, there's no rules. And that was really freeing. That was really helpful to me. There's no, at the networking event, like, what are the rules? Get business cards from each person, write down each thing. I don't know. Maybe, I'm an introvert. So for me, an in-person networking event is much more accessible to me when I can meet 1 or 2 people and have really meaningful connections. And that's how I kind of operate. And like a room full of people at a cocktail party and talking to every single person makes me want to crawl under a rock and never come out. But like, connecting with 1 or 2 people, that feels good. Well, that's not what you're going to read in the gurus saying about what you should do for networking. So the point is that there aren't any rules. It's again about finding your voice. That's why I called it this, is like finding your own voice and using that voice to say the things that feel authentic to you. So, but that said, like, you should know yourself. Like, there are rules, right? There are sort of guidelines maybe. So I will share a couple here. So knowing yourself, we kind of been talking about that. The next thing, and this is really key. This blew things wide open for me in my business, in my sort of life, in the way that I interact with the world, is to not just talk to the people that I know and hang out with my usual crowd. So I stopped hanging out with architects a while ago. Today being an exception, and obviously lots of friends and colleagues and whatever. But like, why am I going to go hang out with a bunch of architects if I'm trying to drum up business? Architects are not where I get business from. Maybe sometimes, for sure. I've worked with other architects. We partner up. Like, that's important. But if my goal is to get business or to widen my circle, then I need to go to the places where my potential clients are, not where my competition is. So, and that being said, of course, there's so much room, like, side note, parentheses, spending time with our people is really, really important so that we can then go forth and do that work. So I'm not saying don't hang out with architects, but I am saying that when it comes to networking, going to only architecture events is not actually business development usually, because you're just around people who do what you do. So what does it mean if you're a firm owner, what does it mean to find, where do your clients hang out? So a friend of mine, she's an architect. She has 2 or 3 employees. She's in Birmingham, Alabama. Her best networking by far of any possible thing was when her kids were playing soccer. She would stand on the sidelines, and she's not standing there with like a booth and handing out cards. She's just chatting with other parents. And next thing you know, like, conversation comes up and they're like, yeah, well, we really want to redo our house and do an addition and do whatever. And she's like, well, I'm an architect. That's exactly what I do. Like, let's chat. And, it would turn into things. She said it was the single best networking thing she's ever done in her life. And at the same time, she was being there for her kids at the soccer game. So I think that is what's going on here. Like, you have to find out where your clients are. And for me, that ended up being some pretty strange places I wasn't expecting. Experiment, that's part of what there are no rules. Nothing's permanent, you know, like if you post something that's dumb and that doesn't get any likes, you can, you know, delete it. um, I had my biggest viral post of my whole entire life 2 weeks ago. It was about balls, not those kind, but it was about how the phrase balls to the wall, people think is like this dirty phrase or something. It's not. It's about a governor on a steam engine and the balls like fly out. Yeah. So that tweet, it was like an offhand thought. I was like, you know what? I'm sick and tired of people not knowing their 19th century slang. Balls to the wall or balls out is actually like a steam engine or an aviation term. And here's a picture. And it got like 8,000 likes. That's my big, that's, and I love that it went viral for or semi-viral for me, whatever, for something that has nothing to do with what I do professionally. But then some people pointed out to me, actually, this is so you, because I'm always talking about esoteric, weird things. So it's very me to have a thing out there that is like, no, let me set the record straight on 19th century slang. Like that's actually very me. So if someone finds that, they're going to learn something about me and who I am. And honestly, if we're talking about business, people do business with people who they like. People do business with people who intrigue them. You know, people do business with people that have lives and are interesting people. So I don't know. I guess so. And then the last thing I have here is talk. I thought that was the last thing. Talk to everyone. I was just buying a phone the other day because my phone broke and cracked, and I was trying to make it work. And you know how that goes. And you're like, I can do it, and I didn't pay for the insurance, and I can do this. And I was talking to the person who was helping me with my phone, and she ended up knowing someone who was looking for a position in architecture. And I was like, oh, I know someone who, you know, so next thing you know, here we are. You never know, just chat. This is coming from an introvert, by the way. I have to go home and like look at a wall after I do all that. And then this one, I don't know, maybe this is just me. So I'm revealing something here. Watch out for the voices in your head who are telling you you can't do certain things, that you can't post about balls to the wall, or that you can't talk about the things you're passionate about. Remember how I said at the beginning about how I was scared to talk about, I'm from a farm. I grew up on a farm. I worked manual labor. Like those were the things that ended up, there were voices in my head saying, hey, you know, that's not like, people don't want to hear about that. You know, you're an oddball. People that's weird, or that's not, you know, that's not part of the crowd, or whatever. And I think in architecture, you know, I still battle that a lot. I do a lot of residential work, and residential work is often not seen as cool as large commercial projects, or it doesn't get the accolades, or, oh, you just do residential. I think we do this to ourselves a lot too. And that's really lame. So I'm trying to get those voices out of my head, and maybe you already have done that, or you can join me in that pursuit. So I promised a little bit of, you know, this is my case study here. This is me and Twitter, which I've already mentioned a little bit. So this is my account here. And, you know, it's been the craziest kind of experience. I don't know if anyone follows me on Twitter, but it's been completely insane. I've gotten more opportunities from this than anything else, hands down. And part of it was because I just decided, so I was on Twitter and I was kind of nerdsing around, and I had like 800 followers or something. This is a few years ago. And I noticed that there were all these developers talking about being developers. And they're like, oh yeah, like stupid architects always getting in my way, and like, ugh. And I was like, well, no. So I would just respond. I just pulled my seat up to the table, and I was like, well, actually, you know, let me provide another viewpoint. Same thing happened with construction. It seemed like there were all these conversations happening, but there weren't architecture or design voices or or construction voices. And it was a lot of real estate bros. And so I just started to enter into the conversation. Like, you can comment on anything. So I did. And I talked a lot about the value of architects and our fees and why we do what we do and building code and zoning code and all these things that suddenly seemed like super mysterious to people. And I was like, oh my gosh, people actually don't know this stuff that is ingrained in me, that of course building code is administered by the state and zoning code is administered by the local municipality. Of course, everybody knows. No, nobody knows that. What? And of course, building code and zoning code don't always agree, and somebody needs to figure out how to navigate that. And that's what an architect does. Oh no, I thought an architect just picked out all the pretty stuff. Oh boy. So I just started and I just got in these conversations. As a result, I became weirdly a leading voice in this real estate world from a design perspective. Weirdest thing that's ever happened to me in my life. Just because I just started showing up and saying things. I was like, I'm not the most qualified in the whole country. And it really held me back for a long time to even engage, because I was like, well, there are other people more qualified to talk about this stuff. And I was like, yeah, but they aren't in the room and these people are saying things and I'm the only one here, so I better say something. Again, that voice, I found myself there. So I opened up my mouth and started talking. So I've gotten business from it. But even more importantly, I've gotten this amazing network. I can go to any city in the country and connect with someone. And I've gained friends, deep, close friendships. I know it sounds completely insane, but it's not. It's true for me. So anyway, I mean, X is kind of a dumpster fire these days. So maybe the heyday's over, Elon, whatever, I don't know. But I mean, today I posted about my tips for aging, like designing for aging in place. And there's a bunch of people like, oh, this is interesting. And I never thought of this and all that kind of stuff. So I think, you know, whether it's opportunities of business or, I mean, I've gone to events, I've been invited to events in LA and Colorado and in New York and whatever, because of this thing, you know? And I think all I did was start talking and engaging. So I don't find Instagram as easy to do that. So I have way fewer followers on Instagram, which is very surprising because Instagram sort of feels like more design, like appropriate because there's pictures. But anyway, so that led to my second case study. I'm just showing case studies of just me because that's what I got here. And that's what I'm here doing. But that led to me creating a whole separate mini arm of my business, which is design and strategy consulting. I found a whole crowd of people who just needed an architect to weigh in on something. And they just wanted, you know, an hour or two of my time as an architect. So I created a website. I created this concept. Well, I didn't create the concept. I'm sure other people have done this, but design strategy consulting for developers and for homeowners, mostly. That's who mostly I work with. And just like bang together this website and set up a Calendly, and now people can schedule. And guess what? They have to put their credit card in before they schedule with me. So I'm not chasing down invoices. And it's amazing. It's great. So, and it ebbs and flows. I had, you know, maybe 2 consultations last week and I won't have any for 3 weeks or whatever. But again, it's the same thing of like, well, yeah, monetizing, obviously that's a good thing to, you know, this, but it's because I found a need in the market. And architects, I feel like we don't generally get our voices out. We're too busy and there's lots of things going on. And then when we do, we find ourselves in these rooms where everyone's super hungry for the knowledge we have. So how can we do that? Every single person could start a service like this and none of us would step on each other's toes. Like there's so much need. So let's go through some tools and then I'll pretty much be wrapped up. So these are some of my favorite tools for making all this stuff happen because, you know, obviously the major part of what I'm doing is like being an architect. So all of this stuff has to be supported by series of tools. So one of my favorites, nuts and bolts. This is the nuts and bolts part of the conversation. is Later. I don't know if any of you use this, but for social media scheduling, it is super, super, super helpful. So I can fill up a hopper for Instagram or whatever for like whatever, a month at a time. And then they send the posts out at the times that I ask them to for the next month. I don't do this on Twitter because Twitter for me is much more organic and much more conversational. So I don't do that for Twitter, but I do it for I was doing it for LinkedIn and then I messed up my connection or something. I got to go in and fix it. So anyway, but social media super helpful. Later, super helpful. A CRM. These were letters and words I had never heard of before in my whole life till I started hanging out with real estate bros. And they're like, "What do you guys use for CRM?" I'm like, "What's a CRM?" So client relationship manager thing. So you basically like, how do you keep track of leads? How do you keep track of who called you, who contacted you, where they come from, what, what I should have taken a screenshot and put it in here, but like how whether the lead is hot, whether the ball's in their court or your court, whether you need to send them something, whether you promised to send them a reference and you totally forgot or whatever. So it's not on like, 27 different pieces of paper and like Post-its everywhere, but it's in one place and it's color coded. And then it has this really cool filtering thing that I set up. So Airtable is just basically a database tool that you can make things really easy. If I'm saying it's easy, guaranteed it's easy. I used Excel for a long time and I just had a sort feature where I could sort for all the jobs that I had won when I was feeling down and I was like, oh, everything sucks. Like this is really hard. And I'd be like, look, I signed 10 projects so far, and you can sort it for that. So anyway, keeping track of who you talk to, when and where, super important. Super important. It can't just be in your head. A phone with a stylus. Okay, when I was literally like, what are my 5 tools, 5 or 6 tools? So, and my new phone has a stylus too. So that tells you, I guess I'm an Android. I don't think they have those in iPhone land. I don't know. Right. Yeah. So I'm Android, whatever. Okay. I use it to mark up pictures for Twitter. So I'm like, oh, let me just quickly, I did this whole thing for a while where I was like marking up floor plans because people were like, look at this cool house. And I'd be like, no, move the bathroom over here, shift this over there. And I would like mark it up, screenshot it and make it a post. People love that. So a phone with a stylus is actually a huge part of, I hate having this big dumb phone. I want a littler phone, but because it has a stylus, anyway, whatever. But that's a tool that has made my life so much easier. Okay, content mindset. Okay, this is a little whatever, but when I'm thinking about my tools, this is it. My brain has a whole mode that's about creating content now. So I'm like, ooh, that's a great piece of content. And because I'm so busy, I don't always get to capitalize on that, or I forget it or whatever. But at least I have like a running notepad on here of like, oh yeah, I wanted to make a little video about this or that. So when I'm, walking down the street and I see something 3 times, I'm like, oh yeah, I should talk about railings. Like the people need to know about railings. So having a content mindset, like what is that 30-second thing that you can create a piece of content for? I can't even believe I'm saying these words. It's just like it seems a little surreal, but yeah, it makes a difference. All right, and then the last part is scheduling. So things like so a lot of people say they don't have time for this stuff, and I get that. I mean, I say I have the time as well, but I think for me, the best thing that it is the best solution is finding ways to schedule things, whether it's a formal schedule like every Monday I do this, or every day from 8 to 8:10 I look on Twitter and fire off 3 responses or whatever. I think that's really key. It has to be like anything else. You got to schedule it. You got to eat lunch. You got to look at Twitter for 10 minutes or Instagram, or schedule yourself for an event if you're not excited about social media, whatever. All right, so the next steps here, because things should be actionable, is I'm giving you homework assignments. You can feel free to ignore all these and whatever. It doesn't matter if you think they're a bad idea. But this would be my homework that I would give to you guys and that I give to myself too. So the first thing is to do an audit. What are you doing in these things, in these different realms? You know? And then do an audit of yourself. What about yourself? You know, these are things we don't take time for as firm owners. You know, we're running around, everything's crazy. You can take, you know, God forbid, an hour lunch and get out your sketchbook or your tool of choice and jot down some ideas about yourself, about things. You're like, I hate video editing. Great. So what are we going to do about that? So taking some time to think through this stuff. What are you already doing for these things? And what about yourself? What do you got going on? Research, this is fun. So see what other people are doing. Spend time on social media. It's okay. You're allowed. This is what we're supposed to do. And see what other firms, colleagues are doing. But this is the big one, outside architecture. See what people are up to. See how people are talking about things and see how your voice sounds different from that and therefore would be a great contrast. Or you could be inspired by and you can work towards. And try some stuff and make adjustments. Like that's it. It's just a feedback loop. Just try some stuff and follow me on Twitter or whatever if you're there. If you don't want to be there and you don't want to be in the dumpster fire, that's totally fine. But like reach out and, you know, I'd love to see what you're up to if indeed you're making some of these experiments on social media. So with that, I'll say I went a few minutes longer than I had originally planned, but that's okay. We still have like 20 minutes left for questions or comments if anyone is still here. And I think people are still here. So that's a good start. So yeah, happy to expound on any of these things and or hear what you're doing and or fill in gaps or answer questions.
Thank you, Marilyn. That was a great presentation.
I'll also stop sharing so then we can actually see each other.
And so if people have questions, please feel free to just unmute or you can put them in the chat.
Oh yeah, I'll open the chat.
I can get us started. I'm just wondering, like, you know, obviously one of the challenges of being a small firm owner is just like the time that we all allocate to, you know, you talked about, you used a different word, but like the various hats we have to wear as small firm owners. And we can all make excuse about not having the time, as you said. But I was just wondering, like, do you have a kind of fixed rhythm to this all, you know, like the various things you do, you know, like you teach, you do the building knowledge Substack, you are like a very prolific Twitterer, you know, like you obviously run a practice, like that's a lot. And so I'm just curious if you have strategies on your end for, you know, like are you rigid with your scheduling and you have certain things that you always do the same time every day, or is it more organic and kind of how is it like ebbed and flowed over the course of the, you know, 11 years you've been doing this?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's on the spectrum of like rigid to organic, if we're using the words that you use, which I think makes sense. I'm sort of more on the organic side of it when it comes to these things. I'll have like a burst of ideas and whether it's newsletter topics or Twitter ideas or whatever. And I find that creating content like on I can design, like if someone says design this right now, I can do that at the drop of a hat because I feel like I've had enough training to be able to do that. But if someone says write a clever tweet now, I'm like, ah. So I think for me that it has to be, you know, if I feel the flow going, then I'm like, all right, yeah, I got to post this or I got to write it in a big document so I can post it later or post a bunch of things later. So I think it's a combination. I think it depends on what we're talking about as well. So Instagram, for example, I have to be more planned about since I work with someone who helps me with all my Instagram stuff. So we're working on these videos. I'm super behind on posting them, as I mentioned. So with that, I have to be more intentional because it isn't just like me and my phone and tweeting, which I can do instantly. So you have to think about what it is that you're doing and what level of intentionality it has to have, combined with your natural proclivities as a creator and a worker. So like if you get really creative at like midnight, then maybe you write like 20 posts or you write 3 newsletter posts or whatever, but then you don't post them all at once. You space them out. So I think it depends on a lot of those things. But I've had to find rhythms that work for me or else it won't happen. So right now my newsletter is on hiatus because it got too much. So it's all there. It's just on hiatus. I haven't sent a new one out since like September. Oh, well, like the newsletter police aren't going to come and find me. Should I be posting like I was? Yeah. But like, whatever, you know, I gotta, so I'll pick that back up again. Um, but, you know, it's got to be a little bit, you got to go with what you need to do. And we have deadlines and things like that. I can't be posting on Twitter when I need to be focused on a client.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. We have a question in the chat from Michaela, which is, would you be able to share how many people and who are on your team, including other designers, the marketing person, finance help, etc., and also who was your first hire?
Yeah. Hi, Michaela, by the way. So let's see who's on my team. So, well, I mean, it depends on how wide of a net we're casting. So as far as full-time Runcible employees, there's one other besides me, and that's Jason Neves. And he and I have worked together. We worked together at UTL, so we've known each other for a really long time. And he's been with Runcible for coming up on 9 years, 8, 9 years this April, something like that. And we're like, you know, we're the team. We're the sort of the constant team. As far as other folks, we have other folks we pull in as needed on projects. So, and other firms, sometimes we'll collaborate with other firms. We'll say, hey, we landed this big fish. We need some help. So then we'll pull in another firm. And we have like established relationships with a couple other small firms. That's what I think is really powerful about being a small firm is that you can do that and you don't have to hire 5 people just so that you're ready in case that big thing comes, but you have established relationships with sort of good friends that you can kind of pull in and strategize with. So as far as and Jason was my first hire as well. I decided a great piece of advice I got along the way was to hire the most expensive person you possibly could for your first person. So a lot of people make the mistake. I think it's a mistake of hiring sort of an intern as their first person. An intern needs a lot of guidance and a lot of handholding, as they should. That's the point they're in their career. And as a busy firm owner with your first employee, you don't have time. You need someone to take something off your plate fully. So if you hire someone who's more advanced, then they can take whole entire pieces off your plate. They aren't asking you questions every 5 minutes. And so I pass along that advice. And then as far as other people, I mean, I have a large team of other folks who are helping. So I have a person who helps with social media. She does a lot of photographs and creates my videos. And I'm really behind on responding to her. So that's the third time I mentioned it. So if she's listening, she knows I know. And then finance, you mentioned, I mean, I have an accountant and have since day one. And I have an outsourced bookkeeper. I did my own books for about 6 years. And then at some point I was like, all right, I've done this. I know how to do this. I would like to not do this anymore. So I have an outsourced bookkeeper who works with my accountant. So that's all organized. And then one of my most favorite members of my little erstwhile team is my lawyer. So I work with, I started with the AIA. It used to be called Legal Line. Now it's called something else. Anyway, it was amazing. And he's become an integral part. I just call him, I'm like, Chuck, what do I do?
The Chuck Hoyer.
And Chuck Hoyer, the lawyer. Yep. So he's amazing. So there's some other questions here I want to make sure
Yeah.
we get to.
I
Um,
can read them so you don't have
yeah,
to read
yeah.
them, so that they're preserved for posterity. So Dana asks, do you think there should be a difference in strategy between marketing for growth versus marketing to better define the nature of work you want to do?
That's a great question. And if I were a marketing expert, I would definitely have a better answer for you than probably the one I'm about to give. But I think the more established I've become, the less afraid I am to be very clear about the kind of work I want, rather than saying like I can do everything. Like I I want to market for the work I want to do. And I feel like I've got enough work and I've got some savings in the bank or whatever, so that therefore I'm not so desperate to take every little thing that comes across my desk. Um, that said, this is always a little bit of a scary boom and bust industry, and everything can change tomorrow. If your big client says, let's go on pause, everyone's favorite moment. Um, so I think marketing for growth versus marketing to define the, I mean, I've always been really slow. Like I could have grown many times. I've hired up before. I hired people and rented an office and really tooled up in February of 2020. So I'm like seriously scarred after having gone through that. Um, and I've tooled up to more employees at different times and I've grown at different times, but growth is never growth in terms of size of people working for me has never been my goal. Growth in terms of efficiency and revenue and awesome projects I love has been my goal. I haven't talked anything today about my real estate activities, but I'm a real estate investor. I own property and I'm working on developing property. I'm sitting in a building that I just bought and had turned it into my office. Um, and I have an empty lot that I will be working on developing. So part of what I'm up to is using the architecture business to fund real estate activities. So that means that I have to be very careful with the amount of risk I'm taking, because I am trying to do other things than just grow an architecture firm. I'm trying to participate, as I like to say, in all phases of a building's life, from development through design through construction. So I think that impacts how I answer that question. I'm not out here trying to, by year 5, have 15 people, and by year whatever. I'm not saying that's what you meant, but just to say that that's why I don't push for that kind of growth.
Okay, we got another one here from Patrick. With the theory that folks need several touch points before they hire you, what are some additional ways besides Twitter and Instagram that you keep top of mind? And where's the line so you don't start being a nuisance?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I honestly think the additional ways besides Twitter and Instagram, I mean, my newsletter, anytime you have a chance to remind people that you're cool and smart and you do the thing that they like, you can solve the problem they have, then that's a good thing. So I don't do a whole lot of reaching out to people. If, you know, generally, I'm trying to, I forget where I heard this, but I'm trying to get to know as fast as possible. I'm trying to get someone to tell me no fast, because I don't want to be like, well, maybe we'll do a project and can we meet one more time and can we talk through the proposal again? And I'm like, look, if it's not a raging yes, it's probably not gonna, like, no. It's like dating. Like if you're not like, this is a great person, let's keep going. Like, are you just passing your time with me? Like, so I think for me, I don't know what other ways besides those things, um that I because I don't really reach out a bunch of times. Like usually those things do most of the selling for me. So by the time someone comes to me, they already know my shtick, and they're kind of like, we want what Marilyn does. So makes it easier.
I like enthusiastic yes. That's like a great way of putting it. Um, Taylor asked, Thanks for the talk. Based on your experience, what would you recommend for an academic who's leaving the academy and starting a small practice without clients?
Get clients. So that's the first thing you need. Unless you're independently wealthy, in which case, like, you can do vanity projects. But, and I don't say that in a kidding way. I mean, you might be. So, but assuming that you're not, since most of us aren't, you need clients. So, unl and not to be silly about it, but seriously, unless you have another source of income. So one of the tried and true ways, especially in the Boston area, to kind of supplement beginning practice is teaching. And that's certainly what I did. When I left full-time academia, I kept all my teaching assignments. So I was teaching 3 classes a semester, and it was rough times financially, but I could pay most of my bills and kind of hang in there until I got some clients. But yeah, I mean, you can't have a practice without clients. So that's the most important thing. I mean, you need like a laptop with a couple of software programs and your license and some insurance and some clients, and then you've got an architecture firm. So um, if you're asking how do you find clients, that's a whole other conversation, which we can certainly get into. Um, but um, yeah, I mean, the first thing you got to do is get people to pay you to do what you want to do.
Marilyn, I have a question.
Sure.
I think your design consulting services, that's so smart and makes a lot of sense. Do you find that it turns into bigger projects, into full service projects?
It has, but it usually does not.
Mm.
And you know what? I'm totally fine with that. If someone just wants a practiced eye to look over their half path design with them, I don't really want that project. Like, that project is not going to be a project I'm going to do, but I'm going to have some killer advice for them in a 90-minute session where we're, looking over whatever their designer from Fiverr thought up, right? So that value is huge. And by the way, you can go check out the website and see what I charge. You should, because I don't do this for a small amount of money, because the amount of value that I'm providing in an hour is 20 years worth of experience in 3 different realms, construction, architecture, development a little bit, and real estate, owning and operating real estate for the last 10 years. Like, I'm bringing you all of this. I can save millions of dollars with one sentence. And I'm not saying that because I'm trying to toot my own horn. I'm saying that because that's the reality, and architects often forget the value that they bring.
Yeah, and I think we often do that level for free, and
Yep.
then they walk away, and you're like, wait, I
Yep.
just told them how to fix it. Now they're gone, and I got paid
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah. And you know what? You have to be fine with people saying, no, I don't want to pay that
Yeah,
for an hour. And you're like, okay, see you later. Fine.
right.
It doesn't matter. I don't, I don't care. And I used to care a lot. I used to like, oh, well, maybe I should have made it less expensive, or maybe I should have this, or maybe I should have that. No, I don't care anymore. And I don't mean that in a callous way. I just mean it in like well, then it's not a good fit. It's like you're at the store and you see all the different prices of things and you choose one, not the other. It's no big deal.
I We're pretty much at the hour, and I feel like that's actually such a great place to leave it because I yeah, I mean, I think as a small practitioner, of course, we all have this like hunger for work, and that's like what literally feeds us. And I think often we kind of undervalue ourselves, which I think devalues the profession more broadly. So I really appreciate that approach. I think for those of you that want like more insight into or more thoughts from Marilyn, more insight into her as a practitioner and a fuller human, she's been on a bunch of podcasts. So basically, if you Google her name, you can listen to her on Entree Architect. You can listen to her on a bunch of other like design, real estate, architecture specific podcasts. And we didn't even get into the powerlifting today. So,
Oh
next
no,
time
yeah, we
maybe.
didn't get into that. And all that's on my website, not the powerlifting, but I have a press section where you can see all those. And I just want to say that as an underline is like, also when you give away a bunch of stuff, you can feel more confident for charging this, for when I give away a ton of free stuff. And I'm delighted to. And then when it's time to, you know, get paid, it's time to get paid.
Well,
Is that
thanks
really
again
the
so
last thing
much.
I'm going to say? I guess it is.
No, I love it. I love it. I think it's the perfect end. Thanks again so much. Thank you all for coming. We have another event next month that'll be with Andrew Frederick from Croft talking about biomaterials. So we hope you'll join us for that. You too, Marilyn. And thanks again. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Reach out if you have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.